Welcome, curious minds, to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something, well, something so basic you probably don't think about it much. The number zero, we use it all the time, right? To mean nothing, absence, a void, zero apples, zero emails, off, false, simple. But what if? What if that simple understanding is fundamentally wrong, like completely mistaken? What if that little symbol, zero, holds a key to understanding, well, reality itself? Get ready, because your ideas about emptiness, maybe even existence, are about to get a serious shakeup.
Oh, definitely. We're diving deep today into a perspective that forces us really to rethink what nothing even means. Our focus is this fascinating text is titled Zero, the Fullness of Coherence. And it's not just redefining zero mathematically. It takes on a huge debate in physics, you know the one. Is reality fundamentally digital, like bits and bytes, or is it analog, smooth, and continuous? And we'll be weaving this into the framework of Unified Coherence Theory, UCT.
Right. So, our mission today is to unpack this really bold, kind of mind-bending idea. We're going to peel back those layers of thinking that have, well, shaped how we see reality for ages. We want to show you how redefining zero can actually dissolve some long-standing paradoxes in physics, how it offers a more, I guess, unified view of reality. And honestly, I think it's going to change how you think about, well, everything. Information, existence, the works. Prepare for some serious aha moments. This one's a big one. So let's start with the argument the paper challenges. It calls it the clever argument. And it has been pretty persuasive for a long time. It goes something like this. Premise one. If reality is digital, it needs true zeros. Absolute off states. Nothingness.
It's like a perfect binary switch. Off means off. Completely.
Exactly. A real void. Premise two. Physics, especially quantum mechanics, tells us that true absolute nothingness, it just can't exist in nature.
Right. The quantum vacuum isn't empty. Well, it's fizzing with energy, virtual particles popping in and out. It's very active, not a void at all.
So if digital needs true zeros...
And true zeros don't exist.
Yeah. Then the conclusion seems logical, right? Nature can't be digital. It must be analog. Continuous, no perfect off states allowed.
And you can see why that's compelling. It seems to follow quite neatly.
It does. It feels almost airtight. You know, it shapes so much of this digital versus analog discussion. And here's the twist. The paper we're looking at says this whole argument, clever as it sounds, is built on a mistake. A fundamental error.
Yes, a critical one.
Wow.
The paper points this out right away. The entire argument rests on assuming zero equals nothing.
Zero equals nothing.
That's the critical category mistake, as the paper calls it.
Okay, category mistake. Why is that such a big deal? It sounds kind of subtle.
It is subtle, but the implications are huge. The paper states it clearly. In coherence ontology, nothing cannot exist.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't just, a philosophical handwave. There's a deep reason within UCT. Think about it. What would absolute nothing even be? To exist, even as a concept, something needs, well, some quality, some potential for interaction, something that makes it distinct.
Right, you need something to define it against.
Exactly. Without interaction, resonance, field structure, anything, there's no distinguishability. And if there's no distinguishability, the paper says, thus no ontology, no fundamental basis for existence. How could literal nothingness host physical laws? Or vacuum energy? Or fluctuations?
It couldn't. It would just be nothing. Undefinable.
Precisely. It's incoherent. A conceptual impossibility, really, not just physically absent.
Okay, I think I'm getting it. So the standard argument is right, that a physical void doesn't exist. Physics confirms that.
Mm-hmm.
But then it jumps to, therefore, nature must be analog, because it assumes digital needs that specific kind of void.
You've got it. That's the leap. The debunking of zero as physical absence is correct. Physics shows that. But the conclusion drawn that reality must be analog is, as the paper puts it, too small.
Too small.
Yeah, it misses the real nature of zero. It correctly sees there's no void, but draws the wrong conclusion because it misunderstands what zero is. It's like looking at a perfectly still reflective lake and saying there's nothing there, when really it holds the potential to reflect everything. It's full, not empty.
Wow, okay, that's a major pivot. So if zero isn't this nothingness, and nothingness itself is incoherent, what is zero then? This is where it gets really mind-bending, right? The paper flips it completely. It says, within UCT, zero is not emptiness. It is full symmetry, the deepest saturation of potential. Full symmetry. That phrase really lands. And mathematically, they write it as zero a maximal coherent state.
Yes, and this is absolutely central, foundational. That ocean analogy you used earlier is good. Imagine that perfectly calm surface. No ripples, no waves. Stillness. But that stillness isn't empty. It holds the potential for all waves, all forms, right, before any specific one appears. That is the full symmetry, the maximal coherence. It's not an absence of activity. It's all activity held in perfect, undifferentiated balance.
Like a spinning top, spinning so perfectly it looks still.
Exactly like that. It's not an absence of motion, but a perfect balance of
Then
motion.
this maximal coherence state,
Yeah.
is that the omnilectic attractor the paper mentions?
That's the term, yes. It's the ultimate state of balance. The unbroken field, before any asymmetry, any difference emerges. It represents the unexpressed totality, everything that can be, held in perfect potential before it is. It's the source from which all the phenomena we measure, all the distinctions we make, ultimately arise. Pure potential.
Okay, so this completely changes how we view the vacuum, right? Usually we think empty space, passive background, but if zero is this fullness, then space is what?
The paper says the vacuum is not a void, it is a coherence reservoir.
A coherence reservoir, not empty, but a source.
Exactly, a source.
Mm.
This totally reframes empty space. It's not nothing, it's the wellspring of everything. And think about zero-point energy that energy physics finds even in the vacuum. The standard view struggles, sometimes calling it something from nothing. But here, it's not something arising from nothing, but the resonance of unreduced coherence.
Wow. So it's the hum of the potential itself, not random flickers in a void.
Precisely. The intrinsic vibration of that foundational fullness. The vacuum becomes incredibly active, vibrant, fundamental.
And this whole new view of zero, it just dissolves the old digital versus analog fight, doesn't it? The entire argument was built on that faulty idea of zero as nothing.
It does. The paper argues neither digital nor analog is the fundamental thing. They're both, and this is key, projected appearances arising from the coherence vacuum.
Projected appearances. How does that work? How do you get both digital bits and analog flow from the same source?
Okay, think about it like this. The underlying reality, the coherence, is continuous, unbroken, like that calm ocean. Digital bits emerge, the paper says, when an observer imposes thresholds.
Thresholds, like drawing lines.
Exactly, boundaries. You reduce continuous coherence into symbolic distinctions. When we measure, when we categorize, we're essentially carving discrete chunks out of that continuous flow. We're making the ones and zeros by defining where one thing stops and another starts.
So digital isn't something found in nature. It's something we do to nature through observation or measurement.
That's the idea. The paper gives the example of quantum measurement. Before you measure, a particle's in a superposition, a continuous range of possibilities. Measurement forces a collapse, a reduction into a definite state. A bit of information, yes or no, up or down. We translate the continuum into symbols.
Like in computers, where 0 and 1 are just voltage ranges we define.
Exactly. Engineered thresholds on a continuous signal. We make the bits.
Okay, that covers digital. What about analog? If it's also not fundamental, where does that continuous feel come from?
Analogicity arises because coherence flows. It represents that ongoing, unbroken resonance before thresholds are imposed. Or you could say it's the continuous nature of the flow between the thresholds we create. So the smooth gradients, the waves, the gradual changes we see, those are also expressions of the deeper coherence. They're what the coherent substrate is like before we chop it up with our measurements, or the continuity that remains.
So both are just appearances, emergent.
Emergent modes of interaction, exactly, not fundamental states fighting each other.
This isn't just wordplay, then. It's a genuine shift in how we model reality itself.
And it puts the observer in a really interesting position. The paper is quite clear. The observer doesn't find zeros and ones in nature. The observer makes them.
Wow. That's a big statement. Not passive observers, but active participants.
Yes, it aligns perfectly with UCT's view of the observer as a primary agent of thresholding. We don't just stumble upon pre-existing bits of information. Our interaction, our measurement, participates in bringing them forth from the potential.
It almost sounds philosophical, consciousness shaping reality, but you're saying it's grounded in actual science.
Absolutely. Let's look at the examples again. Computing, we talked about voltage thresholds. That's a clear engineered distinction. Then quantum mechanics. Particle present absent, spin up, down, these definite states only appear after decoherence. Decoherence is when the system interacts, when its continuous superposition, its entanglement, gets cut into discrete outcomes.
Like Schrödinger's cat, it's the act of looking that forces the state.
Exactly. The observation creates the definite answer from a state of potential.
And this applies even to just how we perceive the world.
Yes. Think about sound and silence. Your ears receive continuous pressure waves, but your brain draws lines, imposes thresholds to distinguish sound, like speech, from silence or background noise.
So silence isn't an absolute nothing, it's just below a threshold we've set.
Precisely. We carve distinctions into the unbroken sensory stream to make sense of it. The world isn't inherently silent or noisy in an absolute way. The categories, the binaries we use, they're our map, our interface, not the territory itself, which is this deeper coherence.
You know, it's interesting how physics has been pointing towards this, maybe without fully realizing the implications. Like, vacuum energy showing empty space is actually full of structure that fits perfectly.
It does. We thought vacuum was nothing. Now we know it's buzzing. Far from empty.
And uncertainty principles, Heisenberg's idea that you can't perfectly know position and momentum at once.
Right. That forbids absolute stillness, a perfect zero state for everything simultaneously. There's always a fundamental jitter.
Which makes sense if the base reality is this continuous, unreduced coherence, not discrete points. A perfect zero state seems impossible then.
Exactly. And quantum decoherence, the process showing how discreteness emerges when continuous entanglement is cut.
These aren't isolated facts anymore. They seem to be different views of the same underlying process.
Yes, and that's what the paper does so well, using coherence dynamics. It unifies these observations. It says, beneath every fluctuation lies the coherence vacuum. So even that quantum jitter isn't random noise from nothing. It's the dynamic expression of the underlying potential.
We're just seeing the surface effects, the ripples on the deeper ocean.
That's a great way to put it. And beneath every eigenstate lies a continuous field of potential. When measurement collapses a quantum system into a definite state, an eigenstate, that state is a projection from the continuum.
Like picking one note out of a continuous chord?
Exactly. The note emerges from the harmony. It isn't the whole harmony. And beneath every apparent binary lies a resonance topology. What we perceive as distinct bits, particles, zeros. They're reduced projections of a far richer underlying symmetry.
So the discrete world we experience is like a lower resolution version of a deeper, more continuous reality.
That's a very good analogy. The pixels are real, they exist, but they don't capture the full picture's richness.
Okay, this is huge, because if this is right, that whole digital versus analog fight just dissolves. The question isn't, is nature digital or are analog anymore? The real question becomes, what's the deeper substrate that gives rise to both appearances?
Precisely. And the answer the paper gives, loud and clear, integrating all this.
Coherent.
Coherent.
This really is the aha moment. The paper has this great comparison table, contrasting the old view with the UCT view. Walking through that might really help solidify this.
Let's do it. Start with nothingness.
Yeah.
Conventional view.
Yeah.
It's absence, a void, non-existence. UCT view. It's unreduced coherence, the symmetry source. Not empty, but the full potential before differentiation. The ultimate all, not the ultimate nothing.
Complete flip. Okay, what about zero itself?
Conventionally, if it means absolute nothing, it's seen as impossible in nature. Leads to the analog conclusion. UCT view. It's the coherence attractor, maximal symmetry. State of perfect balance and potential. A dynamic generative zero, not a dead one.
So zero does exist, just not as nothingness.
Yeah.
And that impacts the digital ontology.
Right. Old argument, invalid, needs nothing.
Yeah.
UCT. Digital is emergent from thresholding coherence. It's a result of interaction, not a fundamental property needing a void.
And analog ontology, conventionally it wins as the continuous substrate.
But UCT says analog is also emergent, but not primary. It's the flow of coherence, but coherence itself is deeper. Both digital and analog arise from it.
Okay, the vacuum, from passive emptiness.
To coherence reservoir, active symmetry in UCT. Space itself becomes a dynamic source.
And the observer role, this is a big one, from secondary observer.
To primary agent of thresholding. Our observation actively participates in making distinctions, reducing coherence into perceived reality. Not magic, but the physics of measurement interaction.
Wow, okay, seeing it laid out like that, it really is like putting on new glasses. The old debate seems so
Limited now.
You see depth where it looked flat.
And this new way of seeing zero, this new ontology, is incredibly profound. I love how the paper puts it. Zero is not the absence of being, but the ground of becoming.
The ground of becoming. Not nothingness, but the foundation for everything.
Exactly. It's the source state. They call it the holographic attractor in which potential is perfectly symmetric. Imagine every possibility perfectly balanced, superimposed, waiting, like that still water holding all potential waves.
So everything we see, particles, fields, forces, ultimately emerges from this redefined zero, this ground state. How does that happen?
Through coherence reduction, the paper explains. It happens via thresholds where the substrate fractures into asymmetries.
Fractures into asymmetries. Like cracking glass.
Sort of. Imagine that perfect symmetry, the smooth glass. An interaction, a measurement, focusing attention, it applies pressure. But instead of random shattering, specific patterns emerge, distinct pieces with boundaries. Those are the asymmetries. That's how digitality arises. Measurement creates these discrete pieces.
And analogicity.
That's the flow, the unbroken nature before the fractures, or the continuity that still exists within and around them. So as the paper says, zero is pregnant, not empty, the nothing from which everything emerges, because it is already everything in unbroken form.
Pregnant, not empty. That's a powerful image, a womb of potential, not a void.
It really captures it. And the paper summarizes this whole shift in the Coherence Manifesto. These are really the key takeaways.
Okay, let's highlight those. First, reality is neither digital nor analog at its root. It is coherent.
Cuts right through the old debate. A single foundation.
Second, the substrate is non-binary, yet it generates apparent binaries whenever observation imposes asymmetry.
Reinforces that observer role and the emergent nature of the bits we see. Our interaction makes it look binary.
Then the big one, the core mantra. Zero is not absence. Zero is fullness.
That's the heart of it. The one to really let sink in. It changes everything about nothing.
Tied to that, nothingness is not real. Coherence is real.
Which dismantles creation ex nihilo from a true void. If the void doesn't exist, nothing came from it. Everything arises from the inherent fullness, the coherence.
And finally, digital and analog emerge together as shadows of symmetry.
Right. Two sides of the same coin. Expressions of the deeper coherence, not enemies. And this leads to that final, really dramatic inversion of our usual thinking. The universe doesn't arise from nothing arises when we cut the continuum.
Whoa, so nothing is something we create conceptually when we make distinctions.
Exactly. It's not the starting point. Coherence is. And crucially, nothing cannot do anything because nothing never existed in the first place. The traditional story of something from nothing is based on a misunderstanding of nothing.
Okay, let's explicitly connect this back to the wider UCT framework. That initial clever argument, digital needs nothing isn't real, so nature is analog. We now see it relies on a category error.
Yes, mistaking the symbol zero for a physical void. That's the crucial mistake.
And in coherence ontology, asymptote isn't a void, it's a symmetry state, a balance point. Full, not empty.
Right. And once you redefine zero that way, as full coherence, the whole anti-digital argument just falls apart.
So the UCT foundational chain looks completely different.
Completely. It's digital and analog both emerge.
From a continuous coherence substrate.
For a zero, maximum symmetry, not absence, it's a total restructuring.
Which means that whole digital versus analog debate was kind of a distraction, a red herring, as the paper puts it.
Pretty much. It sets up a false choice based on a misunderstanding. UCT shows digitality arises from imposed symmetry reductions, measurement, counting, making distinctions.
That's how we process the world.
And analog continuity is seen as ongoing coherence. The flow, the gradients, the resonance of the underlying field.
So they're just different ways the underlying coherence shows up.
Exactly. Both are expressions of deeper coherence structures, projected appearances, not the ultimate reality. So UCT says nature is neither fundamentally digital nor analog. It's coherent, but it appears as both, depending on how we interact with it.
And the paper highlighted two specific spots where that original argument really failed beyond the category mistake. First, its critique of binary systems needing a zero that can't exist.
Yeah, the redefined zero tackles that head on. In coherence physics, zero does exist as the coherence attractor state, maximal potential. So the premise fails. Digital systems can be grounded in reality because their zero corresponds to this full, not empty, null state.
And the second failure point, the analog supremacy idea. That continuity wins because there's no void.
Right. But that assumption couldn't explain why discrete things like quantized energy levels or particles emerge so consistently.
Yeah.
If it's all just smooth flow, where do the distinct things come from?
A big gap. How does UCT solve that?
UCT says discreteness arises when coherence vectors split an internal symmetry reduction process. It's not just us imposing boxes. The coherence itself has an inherent potential to differentiate, to reduce its own symmetry, leading to discrete phenomena.
Like sculpting shapes from continuous clay. The shapes are distinct, but come from the clay.
A perfect analogy. The potential for form is within the continuum.
So let's just clarify the alignment here. This paper fits snugly within UCT, right? The vacuum isn't empty, fits the coherence reservoir idea.
Perfectly. And apparent zeros being just different excitation states of the same substrate that matches UCT's coherence eigenmodes. It's all manifestations of coherence.
And digital bits being symbolic projections we create fits the UCT observer model.
Right. We participate in creating the discrete from the continuous.
But this paper also adds something unique, deepens UCT.
I'd say it sharpens the focus brilliantly. UCT broadly treats digital and analog as emergent modalities, not competing fundamental realities. This paper zeroes in, pun intended, on a reinterpretation of zero itself. Zero is reinterpreted, not emptiness, but full symmetry, a live, resonant null state from which asymmetries cascade.
Live, resonant null state that emphasizes its active generative nature, not a dead point.
Exactly. That's the powerful refinement here. It makes the concept incredibly dynamic.
It was more than just clever words. It's a real deeper upgrade to how we understand things.
It takes the idea that nothingness isn't real and gives it a robust ontological engine.
Nothing is not absence. It is unreduced coherence.
And zero is the state before differentiation, the unbroken fullness.
And from that fullness, quantized states arise, not because nature is digital, but because interaction, observation, carves discrete thresholds into an otherwise continuous cascade.
Beautifully put. It keeps the truth that nothingness isn't the foundation, but grounds it in this incredibly rich framework of coherence. A universe of fullness, not absence.
Wow, what an exploration. Starting with something as simple as zero and ending up rethinking the very fabric of reality. We've gone past that limiting digital or analog choice to see a fundamentally coherent universe. A universe built not on emptiness, but on the incredible fullness of coherence.
And redefining zero as that maximal coherence, that ground of becoming, it just changes everything. Existence isn't some fluke in a void. It's the natural unfolding from infinite potential.
So think about this. If nothing, as we knew it, never really existed, if reality flows from this infinite coherence, what does that mean for creation, for information, for what's even possible? What new questions does this open up for you as you think about the world?
It really pushes us to look past the surface binaries, doesn't it? To seek out that underlying flow, that deeper symmetry in everything, to see the ocean behind the wave.
Makes you wonder what other simple things we assume we know might hold keys to entirely new understandings. Something to ponder. Till next time, keep diving deep.